If it's getting out of control, you're too big. Words of advice from farmer Conor Crickmore of Neversink Farm. Welcome to the world of farming small and farming smart. One trait that I think humans tend to have is the copy trait. When we see success, we want to mimic it. While there's some validity in that mimicking, it's not always the right approach because the specifics that we might be mimicking are different for every situation. When it comes to the copy trait in farming, things are no different. People see the successful farms of Jean-Martin Fortier, Curtis Stone, and my guest today, Conor Crickmore. And the first instinct is, model them and do what they do. And while that makes sense, it doesn't always work as well as planned because markets are different, climates are different, soils are different, and individual skills and interests are different. So when the model doesn't work for us, we tend to blame the model, not our approach. When you look at a farm like Conor Crickmore's Neversink farm, which grosses around $350,000 on 1.5 acres, it's not about modeling exactly what Conor does. It's about modeling his approach, like using his base principles around weed control, working with a sense of urgency, removing bottlenecks, simplifying things, creating efficiencies, shooting to be the best. If you do those things, you're no longer beholden to an exact model which applies to only one situation. Instead, what you have is a set of base principles which you can use to adapt to your unique situation or any situation. And that's the focus of today's show, Farming Base Principles with Conor Crickmore. One thing that I know you do really well, having seen it in person, one thing that comes up a lot from past podcasts, from the video that I did from your place, is weed control, weed management. Can you talk about your overall approach to weed management on the farm?
Yeah. Well, the overarching philosophy is just no weeds. It's something I explain to people who are working with me, that every weed seed turns into a weed, and every small weed turns into a big weed, and every big weed goes to flower, and those flowers drop seeds. So by just getting some of the weeds, or 99% of the weeds, isn't good enough. It needs to be all of them. Well, that's great. How do you do that? We attack it really hard. We invest time, which is money, into cultivating and teaching everybody to disturb every square inch of soil in the assigned area, that it's all disturbed. We don't just go after weeds, we're just disturbing every square inch to stay ahead of it. And we spend most of that time in the spring doing that. That's when we feel we can get way ahead of them before the big harvest season starts. And in order to do that, we just create systems that are simple. We try not to use too many different types of tools. It's nice to have a lot of different attachments for a wheel hoe, but it's very hard to translate that for every individual crop to a crew to go out there and do it by themselves. So we try to just keep it simple so that our systems can be simple and easily understood, although we may lose some efficiency in that, I think we get a better product at the end, that we get better coverage, easier to learn. And then as people are around longer, I can start adding more complicated tools into the system that they can take over and just assign them different areas.
For somebody new starting out on a farm, how do you put a value on weed control? I get the overall macro, like less weeds is better. It's going to make things easier. But where I'm coming at this from is a new farmer or just a farm with limited staff are doing this. There's a lot of things to do on the farm: marketing, accounting, selling product. Where do you rank weed control in there in terms of, I'm either going to have to pay someone to do it, or I'm going to have to pay the farm for my time to do it, and that means potentially not doing other things if labor is limited?
It's up there, close in the top three, because it affects everything. You can't ignore it and then say, I'm going to spend my time harvesting because it's only going to slow down harvesting. It's only going to affect the quality of the crop. It's going to affect everything. So it comes before all of that. And, we had to learn the hard way that you need to adjust your scale to make sure that you're accomplishing it. So if it's getting out of control, it means you're too big. And so we would tighten up, get smaller, put a section out of use so that we can keep it at maximum production. Because of, one bed, weed-free, at good production, good fertility, is going to be 10 that are weedy. And probably even more than that. Just in the amount of time it takes to harvest and do everything that you need to do. And for the future, as it's dropping more weed seeds and causing you problems long term.
For you as somebody who took what would be an old pasture or a meadow and converted it into a farm from scratch, knowing what you know now, how much of that conversion process when you start turning over a land into farm can help future weed control? Meaning if you do it the right way on the front end, potentially using passive techniques, how much does that actually save you on the back end?
It's a huge difference. When we started, we tilled, and that was a huge mistake. We were taking perennial weeds and perennial grass and moving them deep into the soil. And we have a lot of switchgrass, which, once you chop it up, that just spreads it. And the tilling just buries it. And it increased our work, 100-fold to be able to now take it out piece by piece, because we had to get started. And so we made a lot of mistakes. We should have never done that. Now, if we're going to put something into production, covering it with plastic, and then attacking it immediately. Once we take that plastic off, if there's anything left, we're on top of it, making sure it never gets out of control. Because it's very easy to let other things climb the list and take care of them and turn your back on it for a little while. And I think suffering in the beginning, I never let that happen. Plus now we don't ever open up new sections in the field. We're trying to move them indoors where we get even better weed control. And that's there's a lot of reasons that we move indoors, but that's one primary reason is once we get something weed free, I want it to stay weed free. And I find the only way to do that is to move indoors, screen the house, and then we don't have to worry about weeds going forward. So it's a huge difference from being on our hands and knees pulling out switchgrass at the beginning to within a season having a house weed free and never having to worry about it. Just a light weeding once in a while.
In terms of keeping beds weed free, for somebody who's, let's say, had out of control weed pressure this year, Would this approach make sense? And I'm thinking of this approach because one thing I take away from you is you really think about the whole process involved from start to finish to kind of ongoing maintenance of a process. Your procedures that you set up on your farm cover it all. If somebody is planting now, having weed pressure, would like a kind of a first step to control that weed pressure be to have a plan in place where we seed on day X and we know at day Y, day Z, we're going to come back and get the weeds and try and catch them in the pre-emergent stage versus letting them get too big, and just have that built into their routine so they know after direct seeding, after transplant, so many days later, it's come back and hit that, to start getting in the habit of doing this kind of pre-emergent or early stage cultivation?
If someone is able to organize things that well, then they're far ahead of me, because I couldn't do that. There's no way I could keep track of all the beds and wait an X amount of days to do something. It would be impossible. And if I tried, I think it would stress me out. So I have a much looser system. I just have a single day during the week when I walk around with the flame weeder and hit all the seeded beds. So I might not be hitting it on day 3 or day 5 or day 7. But for me, it doesn't matter because I do hit it and I'm getting all those beds. And that works for me. You know, people have to do what works for them. If they have that really tight schedule, and I'm not sure how you would manage it, you know, you have to use some tools or spreadsheet or something. But for me, this is much easier. I know that on Tuesday, which is the day I'm going out to seed radishes, I just grab the flame weeder, walk around. Maybe I'll hit some beds that were just turned over, and I'll hit some beds that were seeded a few days ago. And that just works for me. Then I know it's always working, and I don't have to be stressed about what day I'm doing it. And it's just a better system for me. But that may not work for everybody. But, you know, if somebody has heavy weed pressure, if we have heavy weed pressure, then I don't bother trying to fix it. I'll just turn it over and start from zero again. And I feel that, I know that's hard. You know, I've been there having to pull stuff out that, you know, it's halfway to harvest, but I feel that starting from zero again, at the end, you end up with more profit. That it may not be gross as much, but your net is going to be much better. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I like the approach. I mean, go with simple, go with what works, because if it's simple, you're probably going to stick with it over something that's complex. In thinking about farms that are maybe overwhelmed in weed pressure, in limited in labor, call it the solo farmer or the farmer that's a payer, do you think it makes sense, if your weed pressure's out of control, to spend some money and hire an employee with one of the tasks that employee could do? Could be weed mitigation. I think the natural thought for a lot of small businesses, not just farming, at the beginning is cash is really tight. But if problems like weeds are getting out of control, are they costing you more in terms of time and money and quality of product than you'd spend hiring somebody?
It's hard to say, not looking at a specific farm, but usually if the weeds are out of control, then at that point, sometimes it's better to start over, or, you know, let some areas go and then concentrate on a much smaller area, maybe where there's more valuable crops, and reset. Because it's, you know, the cost of somebody pulling out weeds one by one when they are out of control is just too much. You know, it's one thing when you, let's say, you done a pre-emergence burning on carrots, and then you maybe cultivated them a couple of times, cultivated them really close, and then you send someone out there just to grab the odd weed here and there to make sure they don't go to flower. It's very different when they're out of control and they have to go in and pull each one out looking for the carrots and try to clear up that bed. At some point it may not be worth it. It's just better to start over, get smaller. And I know that's all hard, and that's why you don't do it, because it's hard to see hard work go on the compost. But sometimes it's the better choice.
On the opposite side of the equation, if somebody's starting out from scratch and they're hearing this and they say, okay, I have this raw land. I want to start. And I want to do it right. I don't want to be doing what you're suggesting and reversing course later, realizing I went too big and then having to scale back because I can't manage it all. How do you advise people to decide on how much land to start farming with if they had 5 acres of field there and they could do a 1/4 acre, they could do less, they could do 2 acres? How would you start to talk them through, here's where I would start?
I would start very small and then cut that in half. Because you can always get bigger slowly. If you have it under control and everything's working, then you can just get a little bigger. Maybe you can cover 1/2 acre with plastic, get it ready, and then uncover, 1/8 of it. Start planting. But wait, it takes a while for you to get things under control and the weeds under control and your systems in place. Once you feel comfortable, then you just slowly grow. But slowly growing is going to keep everything under control and keep you profitable, keep you producing at your maximum. It's really the main decision that you're going to make that's going to keep things easy. Because you can always grow. It's harder to scale back.
I like that strategy because I think growing slowly allows you to do what you're saying, manage things in a way that's working, which keeps confidence going, which keeps frustration low. It probably limits burnout to some extent, and it allows you to really learn versus just constantly being on the hamster wheel and trying to stay afloat.
Yeah, which is better, right? If you're working on a small acre, you're kicking ass and you're producing a lot, and then you're like, I need to extend my washing station a little bit, I need to buy some more totes, right? That's a better strategy than going, okay, I'm too big, I gotta pay for someone to come in and weed, I've got to figure out more weed strategies. Those are nowhere near as fun, nowhere near as profitable than just building up all of the other systems that support that farming in the field.
Say that same person is looking at this model of the 1/2 acre and they're thinking initially off their plan, they need a 1/2 acre to make this financially viable on a full-time basis. If they're starting on just a 1/2 acre, is that approach then you're going to be working another job off farm while you get this scaled up?
I didn't. I was all in, and it's just a sacrifice. For me, it would be very hard to start a business and grow it by having a second job. That may not be realistic for somebody, but we knew it was going to be a sacrifice. We knew that, we were going to be looking out after every penny, every nickel. So it was important that we put all of our time into it. Starting a business, it doesn't matter whether it's farming, a gas station, a restaurant. It's a sacrifice. It's not a job where you're getting paid a salary. It's an incredible amount of sacrifice at the beginning to build it. And there's no way around that.
Thinking of that sacrifice, people from the outside can look at your farm. It's picturesque, pretty much weed-free. the gross revenue that you're generating per acre is there. What aren't people seeing when it comes to the farming reality?
That it's a business. There's no salary. It's all up to you. It's all up to the hard work you're willing to put into it. You know, at the beginning, Kate and I, you know, were willing to work 14-hour days, but not just 14-hour days, 14 fast hours, which is key. There's a big difference between working slow and working fast. You know, Kate and I can get, you know, 4 times the amount of work done than somebody else because we have an incredible sense of urgency. And this is, you know, that's hard. It's hard to keep that up day after day after day. But we had it in our heads that we were building something that was going to be easier later. Right? It's the difference between going out hand weeding all day or building a business by building your washing station, building your markets, and having time to do that by growing slowly. And we wanted to put the work into the infrastructure. But behind that, it's, you know, there's no money there at the beginning. And everything that you earn, at least for us, was going back into the business continually so that we could make life easier eventually. But it's not, you know, one season of struggle. It's a few seasons of struggle because even as you get it going, there's continually putting back into the business just to make it easier. If you want to get to a place in your business where you have your system, things are easier, you have markets, that takes investment, you know, and hard work behind it to earn that investment, right? Because that's hard-earned money at the beginning, you know, without that tools and infrastructure. You know, a lot of people, and, you know, we find this with workers, is most people believe they want to farm, but when the reality hits of what it is to, you know, be on your hands and knees laboring, you discover maybe they don't want to do it.
Is it just that? Is it the intensely hard work in the dirt, in the hot sun? Maybe people have never done work like this, depending on how and where they grew up. Is that what you see as kind of a big turnoff for people that blows that romantic vision out of the water?
Well, it's that plus the sense of urgency of creating the farm. It's not just going at your own pace, right? You know, your workers can kind of go at their own pace and not much you can do about it. But when it's your farm, you don't have that luxury. You have to make sure that you're going super fast and getting things done and doing things you don't want to do to earn a living. That's, you know, it's not easy. It's not just about the hard work. Because the hard work is one thing. That can be really enjoyable. Like, before we were farming, Kate and I built a little garden in the house with the stone beds and stuff. And that's hard work. But it's enjoyable. When you start a business, it's the same kind of work, but with a completely different type of pressure. You know, it's like cooking in your kitchen for enjoyment, or going into a commercial kitchen and having to peel 500 pounds of potatoes. It's very different.
Thinking of that, you know, when you try and hire somebody on your farm, how do you weed through people, define people that you think can succeed? You know, success meaning they learn stuff on your farm to go somewhere else and potentially farm there or farm on their own, and they do a good job for you. I've heard horror stories when it comes to hiring. What have you learned knowing how systematized you are with stuff from hiring people?
Well, we've gone through the horror stories too. I don't think I'm very good at it. We've certainly gotten better. You know, now we have a team that is a much more permanent team. You know, they're all coming back for the winter and coming back next year. So we've certainly gotten better at it. But for our type of farming, the way we do things is somebody who's very independent. and self-driven. And that's rare, I found. There's a lot of people want to work in a group and kind of hide being slow and kind of working at a very slow pace in a group. But here at Neversink Farm, it's much more independent. You take ownership of your tasks. You have a whole list of tasks that you do, and you have to complete them in a reasonable amount of time because there's no hiding. It's your task. You're not usually doing it with a group of people. Farming has this way of bringing outsiders, people who maybe either rebel against sort of your standard job or maybe don't fit in well in the standard job. So farming attracts them, even though it may not be something that, that's their passion. It's just sort of as the other things don't work out and they rebel against it, then farming is kind of left. That doesn't mean that they are self-motivated and independent and organized and able to, do checklists and keep paperwork and learn complicated tasks. And so a lot of the time that sort of mindset doesn't work here. It's not a place where we, sit around a campfire and sing and, it's not that type of farm. It's a business. We work less hours, but we do things well. And so, because everything's run more like a business, it's hard for some people who are the outsiders, the rebels.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. I mean, the key here is this is a business. And that, inherently comes with this lifestyle, long hours at the beginning, working with a sense of urgency, taking pride in your work, knowing that potentially everything you're doing will make your future self in your future jobs easier. When you look at people you've had on the farm, when you look at people you've consulted with and who have been through some of the workshops, do you think that there's people who are just potentially better at being a farm employee than a farm owner? While I'm all for encouraging people to get after it and go for it, I don't know that everybody's cut out to actually own a farm.
Yeah, I mean, that may be true. I just don't know. I think things are slowly changing from when we started. We are getting people who are a bit more business-minded. Sometimes people who are more suited to owning the farm are probably not your best employees. I don't really want people who are really interested in market farming. I find that we usually have really bad luck with that.
Is it that they just come in with preconceived notions of how it should be or how you should do things versus being curious, open-minded, and just willing to work and learn?
That's true, yeah. That's one thing. They usually think they know what they're doing and they'd rather argue about it or do it a different way. And they're also not interested in working. They want me to give them an education. And, when we're here and clock in at 8, clock out at 5, it's time to work. I'm paying you, right? They're not paying me. So we're not having classes. We're harvesting radishes all morning. I don't care if you already know how to do it. If you've been doing it for a month now, that's what we need to do. Right? And so somebody who's interested in market gardening or something like, I want to learn something different. Yeah, that's what I can do about that. We harvest radishes all season. It's part of the job. So that becomes problematic. There's a lot of repetition in farming, and some people, that mindset has a problem with that.
Thinking about how you started out, you didn't really research a lot of models prior to starting your farm. You went at it in a way you thought made sense. Knowing that you have this online course coming out, how do you think people who are new to farming or have some knowledge to farming, if they go through your course, should approach this? Should they approach it with, I'm going to go with this system and try and model it? Should they go the more open-minded approach, I'm going to figure out what works for me like you did? Like, how do you blend that not going in with this is the way it has to be done and the need to figure it out and adapt and evolve with using information that can help you avoid problem areas, save time, and leverage off the experience of others?
Well, the course is not about teaching Neversink system like step by step. It's just not what we're doing. There is a lot of theoretical stuff. There's hands-on stuff. There's tools. But it's all about how these things fit into a system, business, into profit. You know, it's about our experience learning that we had to make those systems and the struggles that we had. We talk about how we implemented, why we did. My hope is people take those, take any ideas from it, but also look for new ideas on their farm the same way we were, by removing bottlenecks, making efficiencies, simplifying things around their farm. But it's not about, although our system is in it, we do talk about all the alternatives and the pros and cons of them, right? We don't put circles in plastic and plant lettuce, but that's in there, and why we chose not to, and what the pros are to doing it, and what the other options are, as well as that farming is what you're ready to do in your first few years is very different from what you're going to be doing later. So that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that earlier system you're putting in place. So while, very simply, you may be transplanting by hand at the beginning because you can't afford certain tools, you're planning for the future of your farm, that you're going to have a better infrastructure, you're going to have a better understanding, you're going to be more productive later, and planning for that. But using your present ability and your farm's ability now. So we discussed both building the farm, what maybe an initial crop house looks like, and how that can be built basically, and what I think are the important aspects of that first house are, all the way to what one may aspire to later and the growth to that. We're constantly building our farm. We know we're changing it. My videographer, who's been with me all season, even says it's like we almost have to reshoot it at the end of the season because I will adapt the system constantly as we progress. So there isn't a point in time where you can mimic it and say, this is the way it needs to be done. Farming is evolving all the time, and it's about moving with that evolution. So the course is not only about our past and the different options we chose and why we didn't choose certain options, but that they may very well be good options to what we're doing now, as well as the future. Which I love about this format of it being online, is that it's dynamic. That we can change it, we can add to it as technology changes or the way we do things changes with better knowledge and understanding of our markets or our processes. And I think that's what makes it special. That it's not about a specific hard system that one should just follow dumbly. It's more about theory and being able to transfer that into whatever they're doing, or their climate, or their region, or their markets. While there may be things that are true universally, that you want to spend less money than coming in, there are things that change throughout the regions or just in one's personal what one's personally able to do, just like being able to have a Excel spreadsheet to tell you when to burn, or do it more like me where I just grab the burner once a week. They're all valid.
A lot of the systems, the on-farm infrastructure, the tools, that's one thing I think people get attracted to. And I get the whole idea of like, use a lot of the principles here to design it in a way that works for you. One thing I think that people worry about is you can do all the on-farm stuff you want, but if you can't sell the product at the end of the day, it's all for naught. And I know people look at what you're doing and they say, well, look at where he's at. He's selling into New York City regional market. I don't have that market. I'm in rural America. What are some principles that you've learned on your farm for somebody who's doesn't have a really high-end market to sell into if they want to make a go of this?
Well, we sell lettuce mix $9-10 a pound like everybody else in the country. So, it's not about how much money you can get for your product. It's about when you sell it. Are you selling it just in August and September and competing against the big tractor farms? Or are you looking to sell it off season? How are you marketing it? Are you marketing it as a cheap product? Are you trying to get an extra 50 cents for it? There's 100 mini things that you can do to increase sales. It's not just simply as go down to New York City and sell it for a lot of money. That just doesn't work. And we wouldn't be able to have a business with this small plot and be able to earn a living if it wasn't for really good marketing and growing off season. Without off season growing, we would be struggling just on an acre and a half just by, we're in zone 5A. We can't get anything into the field. That's, the last frost is like May 25th. So we would have, just a couple of months of harvesting. So it's not about how much you sell it for. It's about how often you have it. So like we've worked at having fresh carrots every week of the year rather than just having it for a couple of months and then maybe having some storage. But there's hundreds of these little things that help in marketing and getting, the best price that you can. About how to do sales, how to make sure that the product looks better than the large tractor farm competition, having a better story. There's just a lot that plays into it rather than just a good market.
Well, I think one thing people miss is they say, look at what he's doing. He's selling into a region around New York City, but they miss the fact that you're not the only farm selling into that region. It's not like you just have to roll up and people, grab the produce out of your truck, throw money down and run away. Other farmers realize that there's a viable market here and you're in that market competing against them. So it's not just show up and sell. You're having to go in there and hold your own with other vendors who are trying to do the same thing. And that's the same in any market across the country.
Yeah. We started at very small markets where there was maybe, 5 farmers. We were like, we're going to be the best. We're going to have the best looking stuff, the best stand. We're going to have the stuff available more often, the longer season. But that's just with 5 farms. And if you can't do it with the 5 farms, you've got to continue working on it. But then as you move into bigger markets, suddenly you're like, wow, okay. Those guys are good. Those guys are good. Wow. He has this at this time of year. Well, then there must be a way to do that. So we're going to figure out how to do it and get better. And as you move from market to market, it just gets more difficult to be the best, right? You go into a market in New York City, there can be 50 vegetable vendors. People who have been farming 30 years who've been doing this, who have all the investment you can imagine. You know, great, really great, big farms that can dump tons of produce into the market. It doesn't matter if it's in New York City. It gets harder, and you have to up your game every single time because you're going to get lost, right? A little tiny farm in one of those big markets is just going to get lost. It's not, easy. It's easier in a small market to be the best and to stand out, right? You have farms in New York City that have, 10 tents. That's 100 feet. 100 feet. I mean, people will be exhausted by the time they get to the end of their tents. By the time they get your tent, they're done, And these guys have the ability to grow everything. On an acre and a half, you can't grow everything. You've got to grow what's profitable.
I think it was in the last podcast you said something, and this is always stuck with me. And I look at farmers markets now every time I walk through them differently because of it. Look at what the big farms are doing and mimic that, even if you're not big. Big farms come with a lot of inventory, and they look like they're big farms. As a small farmer, you're saying, hey, we just brought everything we had, and we made it look like we were a big farm, even though we weren't. And I thought about that and, looking at the pictures of your booth on Instagram and then seeing kind of the opposite approach of 5 bundles of radishes setting out 5 bundles of lettuce. And I can see the strategy of how you move more going that way.
Yeah. And, we were there. We were at the beginning, our first, when we was our first market, I was worried about every bunch of radish. I'm like, oh my God, if it wilts, I'm losing $250 or something. And I had to have a change of mindset because I'm just standing there all market watching what was a big farm at this little tiny market. They had maybe 3 tents. But to me it was huge, and they just had a line. So why am I worried about this one bunch of radish wilting? I've got to not be so worried about it. I can't be like, instead of us coming home from market and being upset with having to compost a little bit of produce, I should be more concerned with just pumping out product as much as we can and making piles of it. Even if I have to put a big pile in the compost, I'd rather sell a much bigger pile at the market. And it was a big change of thinking for us. It, thankfully happened early on, but you also have to have the production to match that.
And that's where you're at now with the farm. And circling back to one thing you talked about earlier is, selling greens, say just 2 months of the year or seasonally. And at the workshop that I attended at your place, you said this, and another thing that really stuck with me, you're trying to stay ahead of the greens curve. When people get sick of greens, you want to be moving on, and you want to be the one that makes them sick of the greens in the first place.
Yeah. Same with tomatoes, same with anything. I wanna be there when the demand comes. There's this point, this is in New York, but every region is going to be different. You have to know your region to know the demands of customers. But, it's a long winter here. January and February, it's very cold. People are cuddled, inside, and they love buying greens at that time. But then there's a point at which the sun comes out, snow melts, and everybody comes rushing to the market. And it's such a great time to be selling things for a reasonable price because you're not competing with, there's a low supply, but the demand is incredibly high. People just, really want something. And it's just not a selection of greens. While you're still selling greens, it's just no longer our priority anymore once that happens. And we do that with a lot of things. There's some things which have an even demand, at least in New York, year-round, like carrots, it's always popular, maybe spinach or lettuce heads. But there's certainly demand for some products go up and down. Even tomatoes, people buy lots of tomatoes when they first hit the market. And then there's sort of a steady decline until, as the season gets, and I find that decline is happening when the bulk of the tomatoes come out, that they're already in decline. The demand is getting less, but the supply is getting crazy, which is why I want to get out of the tomato business. Come August, I don't want to have anything to do with it. They're just too expensive to deal with to get a low price for. So, we start plotting for winter.
Knowing that people are going to have to learn their markets, do you think you look at the first year almost as a sacrifice year, or go in with at least relaxed expectations? Because you can only research so much. You can only find so much or plan so much on paper. Like, you're going to have to go through the first year and see where is the seasonality here, where's the demand, what's working, and then not judge themselves so harshly looking back after that first year?
Yeah, sure. But I also think focus on profitable crops. Because, you're really just driving profit the first year, kind of screwing other things. While you want to be efficient, you want to be concerned about time, usually you're not paying anybody. It's just you or you and your partner. And the important thing is just to drive profit. Taking risks, putting things out too early. And so when you do that, you want to make sure that you're growing things that have a very good chance of selling, so that you can at least monetize everything that you're doing, all that hard work.
Thinking of crops that aren't that weird, here's an example from your farm that plays into that. You talked about why you don't grow beets and why you grow carrots, and the ratio of people who buy carrots to beets. Can you talk about that and why you went down that route?
At least, in our market, people buy, carrots, got to be 10 to 1 on beets. And even people who do buy both, they always buy more carrots than they buy beets. Because people don't really see beets as a raw crop. Things that you can eat raw are much more popular because most people don't cook. I think it's only a quarter of people actually cook. So they're looking for things that they can eat raw, like a salad, throw some tomatoes on it, some cucumbers, some carrots. While I eat beets raw, most of the consumers don't see it that way. They want to roast them, and that's more effort. So it's a much less popular crop. So we grow it, but I don't overproduce it like I would something more popular like lettuce heads or carrots. We overproduce them.
There's one example right there with a not so weird crop. You grow the exotic crops and you think, well, I can sell this at high dollars per pound, but you might not move volume in it. In many ways, this is a volume game, moving profitable crops when it comes to volume. When you think about overproduction, one way people can look at that is that's a waste. You're growing too much of something. You need to cut back, try and get it closer to how much you're actually selling. How do you view overproduction in the big scheme of things?
If you're not able to throw away produce, you can't be a farmer. That's just it. There's just no way. Like saying I'm going to own a restaurant, I'm not going to throw anything away. It's part of being in that business. You're not going to be able to grow the exact number that you can sell. You're just going to be growing less than, and it's going to continue to hurt you. You can't grow. At a farmer's market, you're not going to sell your last lettuce head. It's sitting there lonely, and people are not going to want to touch it. You know, they want to buy from a pile. So there's always sacrificial vegetables. And it was a hard lesson for us at the beginning, but we got over it pretty quick. You know, it's just being turned back into compost anyway. But one can't be skittish about that. It's like becoming a farmer and not want to hurt worms. You know, your plow cuts the worm. It's just part of the business to overproduce and to make, you don't want to overproduce too much and that's not about being wasteful with the produce, it's about being wasteful with your time and money. But if you can sell 90% of what you're producing, that's great. 95%, great. But so they want to sell 50%, then you've got to pull back, grow less of it. But you always want to grow more than you can sell, but just by a bit.
And one thing that's coming up a lot in this episode is grow crops that are profitable. And that likely means a farm's probably growing less variety than maybe a big farm or a big CSA farm that has lots and lots of types of vegetables that they're growing. One thing I know from just seeing questions people obsess on is, I'm going to grow radishes, but I'm so hung up on what variety of radishes I'm going to grow. How do you talk people through just getting over that obsession on specific seed type?
You know, it comes down to growing what's popular to make money. And then once you've made money and things are relaxed, you can grow what you like. That you kind of earn the right to experiment. I wanted to grow a whole bunch of different stuff at the beginning. You know, we were growing, certainly stuff that didn't sell only because I want to, or because it had a pretty picture in a catalog. But, we had to stop doing that and grow things that were popular. But when the farm's working, being able to earn a living, then I feel like you've earned the right to just, we throw a few melons in our house, not to make money, but because we want to try it, we want to grow it. It's fun to grow, and we do that with a lot of different things. It's reserved some area, but we kind of earned the ability to do that. Even in the winter, we set aside some areas to grow things that maybe have a low chance of success, but it keeps things interesting rather than just growing spinach and lettuce during the winter. We're always trying to add, and a lot of things come from that. We'll try 10 things in the winter, and only one will actually graduate to what we call working, meaning that it's actually profitable, has enough weight, it has enough consumer interest, it's easy enough to grow, has low risk.
Are there any crops that you trialed this year or will be trialing over the next few months and into the spring that could show up on your market stand next year that weren't this year?
Sure. And it's usually seasonally, right? So we'll trial stuff for spring that would only really be a spring crop, and then we'll trial stuff for winter that's really only for winter. There's not a lot of crossover when it comes to experimentation. But we threw a few things in this year that we were trying, and that was because we had a new market. We wanted to see what was going to work in that new market. So a few things worked really well, but they were very particular to the market that we had. But when you're experimenting with things, most of them don't really pan out because there's just too many aspects of profitability that they need. Right? Even if consumers like them, but it's too expensive to grow, or it's just very short harvest season window, or it's very light and just can't get money for it, or it just takes too long to harvest. So yeah, some things, we usually get one or two new things that we like and we'll start adding them in, but usually not to the level of, we should grow as many of these as tomatoes. The popular stuff seems to be pretty consistent.
What's a crop that you could sell a lot of, there would be a lot of demand for it, but you can't grow it profitably?
Melon. Melons would be, they're easy sell. We did a decent amount of them last summer. Very easy to sell. People love them. They bring people into your stall. But for us, they're just not profitable. In one of our totes, I can only fit maybe 4 of them. And it just doesn't make any sense with the amount of time that they're in the ground. We weren't thinking that they were going to make a lot of sense, but we were thinking, why don't we try it, see if there's a way to do it, at least vertically, that we could make it profitable enough, counting the fact that it brings people to your table as well.
When you show up at a market, you bring that tote of melons, or you have this big pile of red radishes up there and your tomatoes all laid out. How much does your body language, your hustling during the market day help with sales versus the presentation of the booth itself? So you have actions of farmer versus product and the way that product is displayed at the booth.
Well, I would argue they're the same thing, because I'm just walking around fluffing, what we call fluffing. It's kind of like you're at the Gap, when there's somebody walking around who's holding all the stuff and representing it. Well, when people come into your stand, they're always screwing up the piles. They always want the one on the bottom of the pile. So I'm constantly refluffing it, reworking it, moving the top ones to the bottom, reorganizing it, making sure everything. What I tell my workers is, after we set it up at the beginning of the day, when it looks absolutely perfect, I say, I want it to look like this for the entire market. I want it to look like no one ever touched anything. And that requires constant hustle. As soon as someone grabs something, a new one goes on top. As soon as the pile's messed up, it's reshuffle. If it's drying out, we make sure we spray it. It's a lot of work compared to just sitting and waiting for people to buy them and then once in a while doing a restock. But it does make a difference on sales. I think it increases sales like 10, 15%. And over the course of a season, that turns out to be a lot of money, but it's work.
Yeah, so on a day that a lot of people could look at as a more laid-back day of just hanging out at the market, you're hustling, staying busy. You have staff there with you to make sure that the booth stays on top, because really, all that work that you did throughout the week, this is when it comes down to paying off if you're just a farmer's market vendor and you have no other market streams. So why not put all the effort you can into it to maximize that time that you have there? You're not changing the drive time. You're going to be there anyway. You might as well work while you're there.
That's exactly right. You have some workers who think, okay, well, I like going to market because they picture market as easy. They can text on their phone, maybe do a little shopping, go grab something to eat. The market is more important. If we didn't plant on Tuesday, we can at least, make some more time on Wednesday to plant. And that's true for everything throughout the week, but the market doesn't wait for you. You have a certain period of time to sell everything you brought. There's no sitting down. There's no shopping. No hanging out. It's all about making sales during that period. Even if there's nobody at the stand, we're doing something. We're talking about, should we move this? Should we move this closer to the register? Just to increase sales all the time. It's constant work. And I would say sometimes it's even harder than the field. Because in the field you can go at your own pace, but not at the market. It's constant running.
And one thing people might not know about your farm is you only work 4 production days on farm plus market days. So the market day, you're hustling while you're there, and then you're just a Tuesday through Friday production farm. You don't work Mondays. How have you gotten to this point?
Well, you're always going to find something to do. On a farm, you can fill the hours doing something. So it was more about making the decision of taking time off. Saying, we're only going to get done what gets done before 5 o'clock. If it doesn't get done before then, then too bad. We kind of earned that a little bit. Instead of like getting bigger, adding more fields, we decided we just wanted to take more time off. So we started with just taking Sundays off. We had markets on Saturday. And it was just, we're doing it. We used to work 7 days a week. So we're going to take Sunday off and that's it. We're not going to change our mind about it. And we liked it. So then we said we're going to take 2 days off and screw it. Whatever happens, if there's any issue, if the zucchinis get too big, screw it, We're going to take the 2 days off. Certainly we can get more done if we were around longer, but I don't want to be there 7 days a week. I like it. I don't like it that much.
I hear farmers talk about 80-hour weeks a lot. And I could see that in startup. And hearing you, it's like at some point it becomes a choice. Is that right? Where you either want to keep doing that or you need to find a way to not do that.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It was a choice for us. And I have a list of 100 things. And whatever gets done in that day, that's it. If it has to wait, it has to wait. It's just not as important to me anymore. I feel like, we earn a living. That's nice. But I'm not going to forego the rest of what we could be doing. Hanging out with the kids, going swimming, all the other stuff. We're only living once and we don't want to spend all that time cultivating and harvesting and, there's other things to do.
And hearing that, just thinking logically through it, if there's 100 things you can do, you're choosing to not do them, to take this time off, a lot of those things probably aren't that important anyway. Because if they were big issues, you wouldn't be moving the farm in the direction you are. So it sounds like in a lot of ways, and I think this is common amongst a lot of people, it is with me, the 100 things you're worrying about is probably stuff that's minutia that you shouldn't be worrying about anyway.
Yeah, they may be important, but, the list of 100 things you had the first year and the list of 100 things you have the fifth year are very different. And the person in the first year would probably look at you in the fifth year and say, oh my God, what are you complaining about? He would be like, look back here when it was really, really hard. These 100 things were vastly more important than what you're complaining about. Did I get the oil change on the nice new van? Things have a way of changing their importance. You're a creature of your environment. So things seem really important at the moment, but in the bigger scope, they're probably not as important.
And if you think back to your Brooklyn days when you thought about homesteading, having that evolve along the way from homestead to farm, and then seeing the farm evolve from a weedy nightmare to what it is today, is the quality of life you have today what you were looking for way back then?
I'm not sure it is what we pictured. It's very different. We really like it. It's hard to go back in time for me and imagine what I thought things would be like. Even in Brooklyn, we were sitting having a good time, and coming up here on the weekends was great. And, there is a little bit of fondness that you look back at the hard times growing the farm. I wouldn't want them to continue, but, struggle is part of human experience. But I'm not sure I would change it. It'd be nice if it was easier. It would be nicer if I had the information that I had now.
Would you say that farming for you now is, quote, easy?
No, I wouldn't say it's easy. You know, there's always struggle. There's always something. Yeah, there's a big difference between farming as a business and many, many other businesses when you're selling a product, right? There's the common business where you're either manufacturing something or you're buying a product that's been manufactured. Until you buy that product, you can buy 100 units, you can buy 50 units, you can buy 1,000 units. You know the cost, right? You know that it costs you $10 to get it and to ship it to a customer, and then you just add your margin on top of that. That's a much different business than farming. Farming, it's very hard to know your costs because your costs are always shifting, right? You're not manufacturing in a factory where you're taking raw material and turning it into a product, and the cost is very easy to determine. Things change all the time with weather, rain, wind. Your workers are going to make a huge difference on it, right? It's not an assembly line where you know you're going to get a radish you're going to get a bunch of radishes every 30 seconds. One worker may do it in 10 minutes, one may do it in 10 seconds. So there's always challenges in farming because everything will affect the bottom line. Everything could screw things up. You know, the power can go out in your crop house and suddenly things are freezing, and you know that can destroy your whole spring season. So it's very different. It's not an easy business to be in. It's not gonna ever be completely easy.
If it could be hard to calculate costs, how would you advise a new farmer or a farm that's trying to get their feet under them and get back on track to look at profitability? If you can calculate the rough gross revenue on, say, 1/8 of an acre that they're starting on, and that's $50,000, what do you think they could assume as a percentage of profits out of that? Is it 50%? Is it 25%? Is it 75%? Just to give people a baseline of how you could start to approach these things without having gone through it and having the hard costs.
Yeah, it's difficult, you know, just because it's such a risky business and those things are so hard to calculate. So when we started, we didn't bother calculating it. We said we need to keep our costs down and we need to keep our revenue high and we need to focus on that. Regardless of what was happening, we were going to get the best price we could and look for ways to reduce costs. I don't know what farmers can expect because I only know my little bubble of Neversink Farm. So to know what's going on universally on small scale farming, I just don't know. I have no idea what other people are doing. But if you're making a profit and a decent profit, then that's good enough. And then it's about working to reduce costs and raise revenue constantly. It may not be 50% at the beginning, it may be 30%, 25%. But as long as you're earning profit and you can continue to farm, then you can continue to get better. Right? Going from 25% to 35% to 45% in net, I think is the important thing. But to assume I just don't know. I just don't know enough to, even guess at it.
When you talk about keeping costs low, keeping expenses down, are there some common leaks in the bucket that you think farmers could pay attention to, that maybe they're spending money in areas or spending more money in certain areas than they should be?
Well, labor is going to be always the one that's the leaky one. Any way that you can help your labor to be more efficient is going to have huge impacts on the farm. Because, your seed costs on a small farm aren't going to change all that much. You can, reduce it a little bit, but you really don't want to not buy seed because it's going to help with lowering costs. Labor is really the main driver of expenses. How much it costs to get things out of the field and get them packed and get them to market, right? It's hard to change your gasoline cost to the market. It's hard to change your potting soil cost. Sure, you can use a smaller cell, but that has an effect on size when you put it in the ground. Labor is the one that gets the biggest bang. So sometimes saving costs is about spending. It's about buying the right tools for your scale. When we were not earning a lot of money, we didn't have very much money to spend. We thought about it very carefully. What would give us biggest return? For us, it was, one time we bought the cart. And just the layout of our farm, it changed so much. Because you can't ask your workers to run from the field and run back. It's not very far, but it's probably, 150 yards. And those minutes add up over the season. A lot, quickly. And when they're picking up buckets or moving amendments or moving weeds, it gets more and more and more. So that was a big purchase that paid for itself over and over and over again. So it's sometimes saving money is about making the right decision on what to spend money on.
With labor as one of the leaky holes in the bucket, and a big one at that, how much has the task ticket, a simple item that you have on the farm, saved you in terms of labor?
I don't think we'd even be able to calculate it because it hits so many different things on the farm because we have them so specialized now. I put so much work into them and they now affect not only the speed of tasks, but that they're done right the first time, that there's a lot less questions that needs to be asked, that workers get more confidence in what they're doing. It's reached out and touched every aspect of what we do on the farm and has reduced costs in all areas of the farm and is like, I could survive without a lot of the tools on the farm and we could readjust our systems. There's vegetables, if we had to, we could get rid of and then to readjust. But our system of dividing things into tasks and how we distribute those tasks and manage those tasks, I don't think I could get rid of and continue to be as profitable as we are on small acreage. It's something we spend a lot of time in the course going over because it takes a long time to go into the details of it because it's something that happened very slowly over time with thousands of changes to it to what it is now. And it's still constantly changing.
The task ticket, marketing, these are all things that are part of the course that you teach. If people want to learn more about how you're doing these specifics, video of it, see examples of these task tickets, see examples of your booth layout, they can do that in the course. The course itself, can you talk about what's involved there? What is it? Who's it for?
The way it got started was I was doing consulting and people would want to come to the farm. And at the beginning, I was really into it. But then I kind of felt like people were not getting as much out of it as I felt they could. That in that amount of time or in that specific moment in the farm or in their specific situation and what they were interested in asking me, the whole of it was very hard to transfer to people because there's just so much detail that in all the aspects of the farm, because there's not just one thing when it comes to being efficient or profitable. It's thousands and thousands of things that come together to make that happen. So it was this format of being able to spend, a whole year developing something that could include all of those little pieces, as well as going beyond release and becoming dynamic and being able to change going forward based on those who are participating in the course and their feedback. Because I feel it's important that there's that interchange. A book is very static. It exists in a moment. It exists before, many, many people have had a chance to kind of comment on it and add something to it, change it. And so this format I thought was perfect for relating what we were doing.
And in that course, you're covering everything from production to systems to marketing, over 200 different video lectures. You're going to have resources in there. Is there the ability for people to interact with you if they sign up for that course?
Yeah, everybody who's participating in the course is, an Ask Conor button, and, they get to ask me questions about the course, about general farming, for as long as they're participating in the course. And I thought that was very, very important, that ability had to be a part of it, that I didn't want to leave somebody with just some videos and resources, that there had to be an ability to ask those questions, and I'm making a commitment to answering that, because I know people have questions, and I don't want someone to be blocked from moving forward when they can just have a question answered.
One thing I know from talking to you, being at your farm, recording these shows, is this systems approach is something special. The way you've looked at a lot of these processes to remove bottlenecks, make things more efficient, is worth a lot. And I say that as a business owner that's not involved in production farming. Like, if you can save time, cut your week down, make tasks easier, not be burned out, so you can go home to your wife and kids at the end of the day and enjoy life away from this, which is actually a job, not a life, and do that and enjoy it. For me, as an outsider, but a business owner, that's worth the price of admission for me. The production stuff, that's all great. That's going to be in there. But this is where I think people can get the real benefit from you. And in my opinion, this is what you're doing that I think is really unique and special. It's increasing the efficiency, removing bottlenecks, making farming more systematized, and I'm going to dare go out on a limb and say easier. And the proof of all that is the amount of hours you guys work a week, doing 32 hours a week on farm now. Something there is working, and people can learn the principles behind what's working for you in this course.
Yeah. And I think it was this format I felt was really the only way that I could relate how we do what we do. Even a day of a workshop, it just didn't seem like it was going to give as much information and kind of all the aspects of efficiency and saving time, simplifying what we do. I think the more things you see simplified, the more little pieces you see simplified, the easier it is to do in one's own system.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, being at one of the workshops, one of the things that becomes tough at a in-person workshop is you're digesting all of this information in one shot, in one day. It's education by fire hose. It can be hard to digest. And if you have a evergreen format where you can focus on marketing one day, go through that content, really take some time to think about it, make notes, apply it to your situation on paper, I think that's very valuable. Not that in person isn't valuable, but it's hard to just take it all in and start thinking about it at the same time.
Yeah, and in person, sometimes it's hard to ask a question because maybe you're embarrassed, maybe it may seem like a stupid question, or you just don't think of it at the time you're there. You know, this way you can answer it. You can ask the question when it comes to you, and without fear of it being a dumb question. You're just writing it down. And the questions are also answered live so that every participant can hear the answer to it. So you may have had a question that you didn't know you had, that somebody else asked. And the more people that ask questions and similar questions, that helps us to change and modify the course and what we're saying in it, maybe change the resources and react to it so that it becomes even more valuable. Because it's really about making something valuable. I cover everything from simple, starting transplants and seeding to high-tech tomato growing, but without the ability to see how it's going to work on your farm and have that interaction with it, it could lose some value. So I wanted to make sure it had that value.
And hearing what's in the course and knowing that there's a systems to production-based approach, it's really for anyone out there in farming, right? From a beginner to somebody who's ran a farm and just wants to make it better?
I would hope so. I try to make sure that it's not for just the beginner farmer. I wanted to add everything that a beginner farmer would need, but not to such minutia that it would be, painful to film or it takes forever. So it quickly evolves into helping out farms that are already established and already on their way to growing their farm. It is certainly multi-leveled, without losing the importance of the basics of starting the farm.
There you have it, Conor Crickmore of Neversink Farm. A lot of good stuff in here. One point that stood out for me that I thought was really smart was when he talked about weed control. If weeds are getting out of control, you're too big. If you can't manage them, you have too much to manage for what you have to throw at that management, you're too big, scale back. Similarly, on the starting side, his advice was start small, cut it in half, and go from there. You can always get bigger when things are going well. I think the tendency a lot of times is to go big or go home. That can be dangerous because it's hard to do big well, especially if you're new and learning and you have to do so many other things which are required for any new business, farming or otherwise. Start small, get good at that, expand as needed. Wise words from Conor. If you want to learn about Conor's new online course, visit the show notes at permaculturevoices.com/farmsmallfarmsmart and click on episode 118. This course is one that I'm really excited to see come out. I think it's going to bring a new level of content to the educational space around market farming. Because what Conor's doing at Neversink, I think, is really special. His systems, his strategies, his techniques, they're very unique. And it's those things which I think have made Neversink successful. And I think those things can translate to a lot of other farms as well. They're not specific to the context of Neversink. Task tickets, removing bottlenecks, weed management, creating efficiencies. Those are base principles. That works for any situation, anywhere. This course is jammed with 200 lessons featuring those types of things in it. You'll get regular Q&A calls with Conor. There's a member-only forum to ask your questions. So all in, I think this online course, pretty rich in content, one I'm excited to see out there. To learn more about the course, visit the show notes at permaculturevoices.com/farmsmallfarmsmart. The course opens for enrollment today, and it's only going to be open for 8 days. It closes on October 26th. So if you're interested, be sure to sign up in this 8-day window. Otherwise, you're not going to have a chance to sign up for quite a while. Once again, to learn more, visit the link in the show notes at permaculturevoices.com/farmsmallfarmsmart, or see the link in the description where you're listening right now. That's all for this one. Thanks for listening today. Next week, I'll be back with another small-scale farmer making a go of it. Between now and then, keep hustling and crushing it, and stay tuned for another episode where it's all about farming small and farming smart.